What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Absolute Auction Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Miner. With me is Mark and Adam, as always. And look what we did, dude. We did it. We finally did it. First episode actually started out right. See, Mark, you got
Looks
something
good.
going on here, man. You got hidden talents that we don't even know about.
I don't know. I don't know what those talents are. If you figured them out, let me know. But hey, we got it. We got it right, and we're moving.
All right, guys. Hey, follow me on X at Ryan_FFB. Follow Adam at Always Auctions. Mark at Primetime Mox. And also, guys, do not forget to follow the show at FF Auction Pod. Additionally, if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at absoluteauctionpod@gmail.com.
We got our first couple tonight.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Finally, we got a couple questions, so it's going to be a good episode. We have a great episode actually coming your guys' way as we talk running backs and strategies for them. So, kicking it off, guys, we have this banter about Brees and Bijan. Sorry, that fly again is around me. Brees and Bijan, who would you rather have as of right now compared to AAV?
Adam, you had the tweet. If you wanna take this one.
Yeah, the tweet was. You can go ahead and read it, Adam.
Yeah, so I'm just sort of paraphrasing here, but I think really one of the most interesting conversations I've seen going around Twitter recently is like, who is everyone's RB2? Obviously behind Christian McCaffrey. Is it Bijan? Is it Brees? And the consensus kind of seemed to be that most people were leaning towards Bijan, which I think that's perfectly fine. I think you can make an argument for really either player. That AAV, I'm going to share my screen real quickly so we can actually take a look at their current AAV. And
this is one of my favorite tools.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
It's really great, and I really do need to give a shout out to Seth Keller for helping with this project. This is the third year in a row that I've done this, and he's helped me every step of the way. Please follow him on Twitter at FF the At Home Dad. So this really highlights kind of Bijan and Brees's AAV right now. This is the one QB AAV, and all the data is going to be uploaded to Face-Off's website in the next couple of days. So you'll be able to access quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. But for right now, we're just going to talk Bijan and Brees. So this is the current one QB AAV for Bijan and Brees. You can see that currently Bijan is going for just under $42. Or I'm sorry, Brees is going for just under $42, and Bijan is right at 41. I mean, you can make an argument that, like, look, whichever one you can get cheaper is fine. They're so close together. I don't think there's like a huge discrepancy with either guy. I personally have Bijan ranked a little bit higher than Brees. I think his pass catching upside surpasses Brees Hall's a little bit. And I think the Falcons offense is really going to be driven. It's going to be going right through Brees, Bijan. I keep mixing up their names. So I have Bijan ranked a little bit higher. It gets a little bit murkier when we go into Superflex. You can see that Brees's current AAV right now is $54. Bijan's a little bit cheaper at just under $49. Again, most people probably think that's not a huge difference, but you're talking like $5 or $6. That can be a huge difference in auction drafts. Again, I have Bijan ranked a little bit higher. He's a little bit cheaper, so I will take Bijan in that scenario every single day of the week.
Yeah, Superflex, if he's going $5 cheaper, I'll take Bijan. I prefer, if I were on the clock in a snake draft and the two were sitting there, I would take Brees more times than I would take Bijan, I'm pretty sure. Honestly, their situations are pretty similar. Looking at, two older quarterbacks in new places, although Aaron Rodgers has been there a year, despite the injury. Both coming off an Achilles injury. Both are going to need those running backs to rely on. They have number one pass catchers, Garrett Wilson and Drake London, who are both also kind of going around the same area. Rodgers and Cousins also going around the same area in terms of ADP in most snake drafts right now. So yeah, if Brees is going to get a $5 discount here, I'll take it. But if I really had my druthers and I could get them for the same price, it's probably going to be Brees for me. I just think that he's put a little more on tape. Bijan had a good year last year, and I'd still want him as my RB1 if I had the chance. But I think I just feel better about Brees and his track record coming a year off that injury, and ready to go. I think he's fully back and healthy, and I think he could probably show us that he could be, the number one overall RB in Fantasyland.
And that's a great argument too, because saying that Brees Hall has the opportunity to be the RB1 in Fantasyland. Look at how we were treating Bijan Robinson last year. The hype was he's going to be one of the best running backs. He's a huge or great talent that should be easily seeing 300 plus carries, and he just kind of Arthur Smith hated our fantasy teams, wanted nothing to do with us, and wanted to give it all to Tyler Algier. But this year the hype's back there again, and I actually like Bijan Robinson better. I'm going to be on the counterpoint of this over Brees Hall, just because I like Kirk Cousins a better quarterback in my mind over Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers being 40, Kirk Cousins I think is 38, around that age, if I'm correct. I like their offensive line better at Atlanta, and I like the weapons they have around them in Atlanta compared to what they have up in New York. Yeah, they have Garrett Wilson, but outside of Garrett Wilson, what do you really have? Mike Williams? I mean, come on. You're at MetLife Field. How are you going to stay healthy there? It's a field where Achilles go to tear, and so do ACLs. So I'm out on Mike Williams. He's definitely one player that I won't buy. So I feel like the weaponry is better in Atlanta. So that's why I like Brees Hall better, because you have to stop more than just, or that's why I like Bijan Robinson. Here we go again, over Brees Hall.
Yeah, and I think also kind of piggybacking on that, I think the scoring opportunities are just going to be there a little bit more for Bijan versus Brees. I think, like you said, Ryan, the Atlanta offense is going to be more high scoring. They're going to be more high powered. There's going to be more opportunities for Bijan to get involved in the red zone versus Brees. I think. So again, we kind of talked about it on last week's episode. It's not just about investing in the players. It's also about investing in the offense. And I think in this case, the Atlanta offense is probably just going to be a little bit more high powered than the Jets.
And I think in general, when in regards to that, it's kind of why for the most part in auctions, I'm kind of staying away from both of these guys at their prices. For right now, I really don't like going over $50. If I can help it. If I'm going for Christian McCaffrey and he's over 50 and I'm feeling frisky and I want to do it, yeah, I'll pull the trigger. I'll pull the trigger on that if I feel. But I don't know if I want to pay close to the same amount. I know for the most part, McCaffrey's going way more, but it also comes with that feeling of security that you have what most people would consider as the number one running back. But that slight tier down, it might make a huge difference, but there's just so many other usually wide receivers that I'm more interested in having and using as my hammer. Just because, like we said, our running backs are a little more volatile. They're more at risk of injury, especially when you have these guys that are taking the full workload. But that's the thing about running back. There's a risk reward factor that comes with it that basically says I could have a guy who gets hurt and is a complete bust for my team. A little more, a little higher on the rate than a wide receiver or a tight end might bust due to injury. But at the same time, if I have the number one running back, it's probably the most valuable asset in all of fantasy, bar none for me. So it's coming up with that compromise, really. Like, that's why you need to be so on your values with running backs and knowing where you want to pay for them. That's kind of where I am.
It's all about in the par sheet, like what I like to do is go like multiple par sheets, and I'll go running back heavy, I'll go running back lighter, and I'll go running back or zero RB just to see what I can do everywhere else. And that's kind of helps what builds it into it, which brings us to our next topic of going into tiers of our running backs. Now, a method I always like to use, just because you can't remember everyone's name. Sorry, that fly's still around me again. You can't remember everyone's name, and you're trying to figure out like the best way to do tiers. And I always like to use like Fantasy Pros as kind of like a way to reference my players. So that way, as I start building my tiers, I can actually write them down hand by hand and say, I could put Christian McCaffrey, Brees Hall, Bijan Robinson in one tier alone. That's a tier to itself. The next tier could be Jameer Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne, Isaiah Pacheco, Devon A-Chain, Derrick Henry. There's tier 2. And we're all going to have different types of tiers when it comes to building these tiers. I might, like I said in the first one, mine has 3. Mark, like, what does your first tier have? Like, as a quick reference.
So my first tier is McCaffrey, Hall, Robinson, and then slightly behind all of them is Jameer Gibbs in the same tier though, and maybe that's more of a dynasty outlet, but I do think that he probably has the best pass catching outlook for all those players. And I think that gives him enough that makes me feel like I'm comfortable putting him in that platinum tier that I call it, my elite tier. And then right after that there's another tier that's basically, between gold and platinum, that is Saquon, Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams. And then after that, you can go all the way down to Kenneth Walker for me at RB17. That's my gold tier. All those guys, if you want me to name off, Henry, Etienne, Jacobs, Pacheco, A-Chain, Mixon, Rashad White, Mostert, James Cook, Kenneth Walker, all those guys, I'd be happy to have as my RB1 if I needed to.
See, and that's what I like. That's what I love about the tier system. Like, my tier is already different than yours, but neither of us can say anything's wrong with our tiers. It's just based on our thought and how we feel. Like, Adam, like, how would you look at your tier when you like start building it with running backs?
Yeah, I mean, and we'll kind of get into it, I think, a little bit later when we talk about our different RB builds. But I'm really leaning towards more of a 0 RB build this year, especially with how our last auction mock draft ended up the other night. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that McCaffrey, you can make an argument that he's in a tier all on his own. I don't think there would be a lot of people that would, begrudge you for saying so. Brees Hall, Bijan, Jameer. I mean, any of those guys that are going to probably catch, a minimum of 50 or 60 balls. I think that they're probably in another tier. Whereas a guy like Taylor, Barkley, ETN, Kyron, they're probably at a tier right below those guys, just because they're probably not going to get as much of a pass catching workload. It depends a lot on your league format. Is it PPR? Is it half PPR? Is it non PPR? How many running backs are you starting every week? How many wide receivers are you starting every week? So again, it really kind of goes back to what we were talking about in our par sheet episode. Know your league settings and take the time and really just kind of parse out where you think these guys are going to fall, what their upside is, who's got the highest floor, who's got the lowest floor, and so forth with the ceiling. But honestly, the way the RB landscape is shaping up right now, I'm definitely leaning towards just foregoing the RB position until much, much later in drafts.
I agree with you, and to be honest, it kind of feels like we're all investing in players and different assets in this game, right? And no two positions provide like the same kind of production asset wise. Like if you're thinking about running backs, like they're kind of like cars, right? Like they're kind of like investing in a car as opposed to investing in real estate, stock, or any, that kind of thing. Where a car is a necessity. You need one, right? You need to have a car for the most part. You need some way to get to work and do your shopping and get around, right? But that doesn't mean that you need a Ferrari to go to the grocery store, right? Like you don't always need that. You can get by and you can probably save yourself a lot of money, maybe save up to buy a house, save up to buy some stock that you're interested in. If you're riding around in a hoopty, right? Like if you're riding around in a car that you didn't spend a lot of money on, it's still got good life, good wheels, and it's gonna be doing the job, right? So it all comes down to pricing, just like everything in auction drafts.
Right? And that's why I can't stress enough. Like, Adam, thank you so much for like doing all these mock drafts. because that is the best way to prepare for your auction drafts, guys, is to mock and build a tier system. Like mock with us even if you can, because Adam tries to do at least 2 a week if he can. I mean, with our busy lives going on, it's kind of hard to get everyone together, but it gives you a better idea and understanding of like how to execute your own drafts when it comes time to it. And you can try different strategies, to see which one works best for you. Like, how can I build my par sheet? This gives you an idea of how it can work out for you. And it's just something I will never. I'm going to stress this next week and the week after. Like you'll hear me say every week. Look. Follow Adam as always auctions on X, as he always tries to post 1QB and Superflex mock drafts constantly. All right, so now we got the tier part down. Now we look at how to like build running backs. Like what's the best way to look at running back builds? And the ones we're going to go over tonight are going to be 3 of them as we talk about going RB heavy, hero RB, and zero RB. Now, Mark, what is it? Do you think going RB heavy is a good strategy to use, or is it something you try to avoid?
So I think of going RB heavy. That means I'm probably got 2 players in my nucleus. We've talked about that on previous shows. Go back and listen. I've got probably 2 players in my nucleus, which are like my top 5 or 6 players. That's what I would consider to be sort of RB heavy. And in general, that probably means you're spending, if it's not on the pair, you're spending at least probably $50 of that nucleus cash to make it happen. So for the most part, I kind of avoid RB heavy unless the price is right, or if I'm in like a 2 wide receiver league where having that second running back is really beneficial because there's one less wide receiver basically in your starting roster. Whereas in a 3 wide receiver, you'd also have a flex, and most often wide receivers go, the tie goes to the wide receiver in your flex position. So with one less wide receiver in your starting lineup, I might be more willing to go for a 2 heavy RB build. But really, you're taking on a lot of risk at a high price. Like we said, they're cars. Cars break down. Cars get flat tires. Cars, their engine dies because you're not giving it enough oil. All sorts of different, all sorts of different things can happen to your car. And throughout the off season, you're adding mileage to that car. Though, they're playing in camp. They're playing in preseasons. Some of them don't. The top tier guys don't play in preseason. But a camp injury is going to affect a running back, I feel like, a lot more than it might affect a wide receiver. So in general, the volatility of that being in your nucleus, the dollar amount that you usually have to pay, like if you're going RB heavy in a redraft snake mock, what does that mean? Okay, you probably are taking one of those top 3 or 4 guys, Gibbs, Bijan, Brees, McCaffrey, right? Maybe you're getting 2 of them. Maybe you're getting 1, and then you're tearing down into that gold tier that we talked about, one of those other top 17 running backs. Well, think about that cost and what that means. That if there are plenty of guys, JJ Zacharyson, I know, talks about the RB dead zone, and it's become kind of a general fantasy strategy to kind of avoid that RB dead zone. In general, I feel like it's just a little too much volatility for the price. But, if I'm drafting in an auction that's like a week before the season, and I know that the players are healthy, and I know that, they're ready to have a full workload going into the season, and a couple of studs drop lower than I'm expecting they are at their price ceiling, then I might take a shot on a RB heavy build. But again, there's a lot of ifs to that before I actually get to wanting to go RB heavy.
Right. All right, Adam, you take it away. How do you feel about going RB heavy?
Yeah, and let me just preface this by saying that I pretty much exclusively play in PPR leagues, so I typically avoid this build, especially in leagues, like Mark said, that you start 3 wide receivers and leagues that you have multiple flex spots. In that type of a league, like running backs just aren't as valuable as wide receivers. They're just not. So in that situation, I really like to prioritize my wide receivers and focus less on running backs. Again, they're just not as valuable. In a league where, on the flip side, in a league where you're starting 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers, maybe with only 1 flex spot, the more RB heavy build can actually be advantageous. And especially double that if it's in a half PPR league or a standard scoring league. But honestly, especially with the way the RB landscape is shaping up this year, this is a build that I'm probably just avoiding altogether.
To be honest, my strategy between half PPR and PPR, at least as it pertains to running backs, really doesn't change much at all either. Because again, it's not just the running backs that are catching passes and getting those points. Every other position, wide receiver, tight end, are also getting those points as well. Tight end premium, right? I don't like to go
Exactly.
I don't like to go late. I don't like to go late tight end in just the. I like to either go early tight end or super late tight end where I'm paying nothing. We've talked about that before, I think, in our last week's episode. But I'd rather have the advantage at tight end because it's a onesie position than I would at RB. So it might be less likely to take one in a tight end premium at a high cost. So yeah, there are a lot of reasons why you should kind of avoid the RB heavy strategy. There aren't a lot of reasons to do it. Again, I think we've outlined them, and that's basically 2 wide receivers or standard scoring, which is almost dead now. I'm pretty sure PPR is almost considered standard at this point. Standard leagues meaning no points per reception whatsoever.
Right.
So those leagues aren't as popular anymore, and yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. There's a lot of reasons not to invest so heavily in your running back room because of the volatility that it creates.
Which is funny too, because like, as you guys are saying how you hated that, we're hating RB heavy. I decided in Adam's last mock draft to go RB heavy, and boy did I pay for it. So to kick it off, I got Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Taylor both for $46. I couldn't pass up that deal. And then mind you, this is also a 3 wide receiver set. And as you guys said, if it's a 3 wide receiver PPR league, you're going to go more heavy at the wide receiver. Well, my first 2 wide receivers, I was able to get a bargain on with Mike Evans at 23 and DJ Moore at 22. But what I ended up doing was like, I'm going to try this running back. I want to see if I can get 2 other starting running backs. So because Adam, you have it at 2 flex positions also, along with the tight end. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to spend up. I'm going to see what tight ends I can get or what running backs I can get, and then try to build around from there. And what ended up happening was I got David Montgomery for 15 and Najee Harris for 20. So right off the bat, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, David Montgomery, and Najee Harris, my RB 1 through 4 in a PPR league. My wide receiver 3, I don't even want to talk about it. It's Jerry Jeudy right now because that was all I could afford at the time. That's how scary like going RB heavy in these type of drafts are, where it looks good, but what bit me is I got in a bidding war, and I was letting it get to me because I'm like, I'm not gonna let this guy get Najee Harris for anything less than 20. Well, he didn't get him for less than 20, but I got him for 20. And I was getting ready to pull the chair out on the person, but he pulled the chair out on me, saying that if you didn't come back doing, if you were going to do it one more time, I was done. And sure enough, I was at one time I did it. And then that's what happened. So as you guys said, this kind of screwed up my team. Yeah, the rest of my team looks pretty good around it. I got Joe Burrow as a quarterback, Evan Ingram as tight end. But the wide receiver 3 is killing me because I have Jerry Jeudy there. Then on the bench, it's Troy Franklin, Adam Thielen, and Darnell Mooney. I mean, does anyone really want that?
Yeah, I think you would have probably done better if you hadn't gone for Najee and Montgomery and really invested in wide receiver there at that point. But I don't hate that those 2 players at those prices like in a vacuum. You know what I'm talking about? They're good.
Yeah.
They're good prices, and if you look at it, Christian McCaffrey went for $75. So to get it $30 cheaper than Christian McCaffrey, that feels like it would be a steal. But again, it kind of hamstrings you at the end. You can't do that price enforcing on running backs that you feel deserve that price if you've already kind of front loaded your roster.
You know, that brings us up to our next one, Hero RB. As you said about Christian McCaffrey. So I'm gonna bring up the draft real quick again. Christian McCaffrey went for 75. Whoops, I knew that was gonna happen. So Christian McCaffrey goes for 75. The guy pretty much put his team like in shambles quickly because you get he spent up on Jamar Chase, got him for 51, and got Travis Kelce at 27, then Malik Neighbors at 20. So he pretty much put himself in a bind quickly. Guess who his RB2 is? Kendre Miller. Now the hype around Kendre Miller is there, but to put him as your RB2 really kind of makes me scared. Yeah, he was able to get other bargain running backs like J.K. Dobbins and Jerome Ford, which are two running backs I don't mind getting as an RB 4, 5, or 6 or later. Like if I'm trying to build depth at running back. But to be honest with you, like I really have a better piece as a running back as my RB2 than a bench player who I'm kind of waiting to see if, is Alvin Kamara really going to get injured or not, or is Kendrick Miller going to be this running back that we want? It's almost like how I feel with when it comes to Derrick Henry, how we're always drafting his backups every year just to think that we can actually get somewhere with it. And it just seems like it's just a roster clogger.
Yeah, I mean, with Hero RB, I mean, this approach pretty much relies, like you were saying, Ryan, on a single player carrying the RB position, the whole load for the entire fantasy season. So it's important to invest in a player capable of really shouldering that burden. This is pretty much like a ride or die strategy, and it pretty much requires identifying players who can realistically meet that criteria. And in PPR, I feel like your hero RB needs to score at least 17 fantasy points a season. And last season, there were only 6 players that did this, 6 running backs who did this. It was Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, Alvin Kamara, Devon Achane, and Raheem Mostert. And of those, only McCaffrey, Hall, Kamara, and Mostert played at least 13 games. So the hero RB strategy, it's pretty risky due to the limited number of players who meet this threshold. And like you said, if you're investing around $45 in superflex leagues or 60 or more in single quarterback leagues, and your pick underperforms, that one running back, your hero RB, if it underperforms, your entire team will likely suffer. And just like you said, Ryan, the lack of funds that you have during the remaining part of your draft to strengthen those other positions, it's not going to be there, and you're going to hamstrung your entire team.
No, this is like one of my scariest like builds to try to do because it's like if you try to go hero RB, and like you said, like if you did it right last year, you got Christian McCaffrey, Raheem Mostert, because Raheem Mostert was a late round pick last year. He was going cheap in auctions, so that would be your hero RB of 2023. Mm-hmm. And not all of us could have Raheem Mostert. We did have the opportunity to get Devon Achane, but how many games did Devon Achane actually start in your lineup? 5 or 6 maybe at best. Where he had that one breakout game where he scored over 50 fantasy points and then kind of fell off and got injured himself. So it's a running back carousel that you're playing with fire. Yeah. And Mark, like looking at it, how do you feel about going hero RB? Are you for it? Are you against it?
I'm for it. I live pretty comfortably between hero and zero RB, and I wouldn't. I think we can all agree that $75 for Christian McCaffrey is probably a little much, right? Like it's a little too much. So it's not like you can't make it work. Like again, Ryan, if you ended up with Saquon as your hero RB, you probably would, and that was the only RB you drafted for a while, you probably would have done fine by that, right? Mm-hmm. I felt like, yeah, exactly. So it's much easier to pull the trigger on a top tier running back going at cost or undervalued. That you can use as your anchor without adding that extra volatility that heavy RB provides, or spending a ton on Christian McCaffrey provides. Like this past 1 QB mock, I ended up going hero RB with a $36 Kyron Williams, which I think, one, I'm super high on Kyron. And I have been for a while, but he helped me win a couple championships last year when he was really cheap, when I was doing more zero RB. But really, I think that he's a guy that you could definitely use as your anchor. And then it allows you to make, I mean, it saved so much money. It allowed me to really afford a great wide receiving core, AJ Brown, Puka, Debo Samuel as my top three. Just by not spending that extra amount either on the top of the top tier. As if you remember, Kyron is in my platinum gold sort of half tier. That's sort of right there too.
Adjacent.
So yeah, he's sort of somewhere in the middle. And again, if he's like at the beginning of the season when we're past preseason and all that, and he's healthy and he's definitely still going to be the starter, I think he's probably going to be pretty well entrenched in my platinum tier. But right now, he's got a lot of negative reporting on him that is bringing his price down. And, I'm happy to scoop that up at $36. There are other running backs that you can do it with too, though. Like Jahmyr Gibbs went for $43 in this draft. That's a great deal for Jahmyr Gibbs. I think you could easily make a hero RB draft strategy with just one guy you like in the platinum or gold tier. One of those guys you can consider like, oh yeah, this is an RB1 that I can count on. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. But the thing about hero RB that I like is you are still doing the 0 RB platoon for your second running back. And that's kind of how you find those guys that end up either having an injury or unforeseen circumstances pushing them up the depth chart, giving you high-end RB2, low-end RB1 production that kind of buoys your RB position, as opposed to spending all the money and it needs to work. That's the thing about heavy RB versus hero and zero. It needs to work in order for you to win. I saw a guy do this is a long time ago, back when it was more standard scoring, but I've seen a guy go 4 running backs in his first 4 picks and he won the league. But he hit on every single one of the only reason he won is because he hit on every single one of those running backs. So it can work. It's just the volatility and the change. So when we get down to hero RB, you're just lowering that volatility a little bit, and that price that you're spending. That's the combination that allows you to buy a cheaper guy, still a good producer, and then from there platoon.
All right, Mark. Well, since you brought it up, zero RB. It sounds like you're a lover for it. Like, it doesn't seem like you're really between zero RB and hero RB. You sound like a more of a zero RB type of guy to me.
I mean, I do love zero RB. Honestly, it's kind of just a fun game to play, really. when you, I love depriving myself of these things. Like, it's great. But really, it's because I don't really like overpaying for the position in the first place, right? Like, I like Kyron Williams at $36. Like, I'll bid on McCaffrey in the 40s. I'll bid on all those platinum tier guys in the 40s. But like once they get over 45, 46 bucks, McCaffrey's a little bit of a different scenario. He can go for up to 60, and I might be bidding in the 50s for McCaffrey. But really, like there's not much value in taking McCaffrey at the highest possible dollar. It's still like the difference in a snake draft is McCaffrey went for $75. The next closest player value, I think, was like $53. That's the difference between the 101 and the 102 is not that big, right?
No, not realistically.
It just isn't. So what are we doing here if we're paying that much, right? That's kind of where I am. So I won't go hero RB if the price isn't right. It all comes down to it. That's the thing about the RB position. It's all down to the price and are you willing to take the risk at that price? That's what we're doing in fantasy football. You're making a bet based on the opportunity cost. And generally, I'm less willing to do that with running backs. That's true. I mean, and the other part of it is a lot of players have lots of success doing the zero RB thing. Really, last year I won my 14-team auction dynasty league. It's a salary cap league. And I ended up winning the league with Raheem Mostert, Zach Moss, Kyron Williams. The total of those three was only 13% of my budget, right? So that, again, you get RB1 weeks out of guys that come in that even RB3 range, it makes sense sometimes.
You truly hit the 0 RB of like 0 RBs last year, so that's
I
just not
don't
fair.
know.
That
Honestly,
is not fair.
It was not fair. It absolutely was not fair. But I'd do it again.
Man,
You can't do that. You can't do that unless you play. Unless you play
know
the
what,
game.
Mark? Our next mock, I'm gonna sit there and just watch you, and I'm like, if you're not betting on running backs, I'm not betting on running backs. If you bid, I'm a bid, and then as soon as you stop, I'm done, because I want to see. I've never tried a 0 RB build because I just get too scared to do it. I'm always about like trying to get like either a solid running back or two solid running backs that I feel are in my top 15 that I feel like it will be a stable to start. And like you said, I've won championships with them. I've also lost these with them. It's all about how you attack the waiver wire at that point, or if they're able to stay healthy. And it's just a struggle trying to figure that part out. But like if you hit that 0 RB like you did last year, man, holy smokes, the sky's the limit. Especially if you can spend that little of your budget of the $200 to get them.
Yeah.
And if I can just make one more quick point, the other thing that people need to remember is that you can make a trade for a running back. Like when you realize your team is contending and somebody else's team is not, you can make a trade for a running back later in the year that will allow you to have that RB1 at a much lower cost. So it's not, it's just the game theory of it all that comes with it. You don't want to spend a bunch of money on a high price car if you're on a budget. It's just kind of what it is, right? Like you can't overspend on a car as compared to a house or food expenses or any of that other stuff, right? You need to eat, you need shelter, you need more than just a way to get to work. And so if you find yourself halfway through the year saying, hey, you know what? I feel pretty prosperous here. I can compete, I can contend. There is going to be somebody who you can get a running back, and mind you, a running back who they probably weren't expecting to be good for them either, that they're willing to trade for you to help build your depth. So don't always think that what you're doing at the draft is the be all and end all. Where I think I just know that I would rather have a strong wide receiver nucleus because I think they're easier to trade, as well as I think that they produce just as well. So I keep that in mind when I am drafting running backs, and so that's kind of why, for the most part, I'm not trying to spend a ton.
That's right, guys. You don't win your auctions at the draft. You win it throughout the season, just like a regular snake draft. Adam, you seem to love
do
0
pretty well
RB
at the draft too, though.
also. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you seem to love 0
and
RB also. Look.
Yeah, and let me say, we just did a Superflex auction mock draft last night. And again, if anyone is out there watching who wants to join in, please send us a DM or just connect with us on Twitter, and we'll get you in. Like, so much fun. And you get to practice your auction draft skills. But anyway, so we did the Superflex auction mock draft last night, and 0 RB seemed to be kind of the same strategy that Mark and I both employed. Mark, you can let me know if I was wrong on this, but it seemed to be kind of what we were both employing. And this was a full PPR draft. And after seeing the results of the players that we both drafted, I got to say, like I said, I definitely think I'm leaning 0 RB this season. For example, Mark, you spent a grand total of $25 on 4 running backs. You got Raheem Mostert, Jalen Warren, Javonte Williams, Zach Moss, and Jerome Ford. I went into the draft saying that I wanted to spend no more than $20 on my running backs. So I drafted Tajay Spears, Trey Benson, Gus Edwards, Zach Charbonnet, and Kendre Miller. And I got those guys for $18 with a $200 budget. Now, the names on mine or Mark's teams may not immediately leap off the page, but I think Mark will agree with me on this one, is that those players definitely offer standalone value and the added benefit of they have enormous upside. And the more that I look at how the rest of Mark's and my team shaped out in the mock, again, the more I think that I'm probably going to employ a 0 RB strategy this season, especially in PPR. And I think it's just really the way to go this year. I got to tell you, I really do.
I think you guys will actually
Yeah.
convince me now. All right, Adam, your next mock. I'm jumping in. I'm going zero. I'm gonna tell you guys right now. I'm going zero RB. You're gonna see it happen. I'm gonna try it both in Superflex and in one QB, and then see how well I actually feel about it. If I can actually stomach it, because if I can't stomach it, you're gonna see another high end running back on my team.
It's hard. It's hard not to press the button. I think really what you got to do is you got to make sure that you're bidding. You're bidding before, way before you get to your limit, right? Like bid a couple times in that range where it's like, okay, this is a fair price. This is a good price for me. If you can get a couple bids in there, great. Okay, and if it stops on you, great. You landed the player. That's fine. But someone almost always is going to bid more. so
Yeah.
so as long as you stay out of the this is too much for this guy window, usually someone's going to outbid you on a top tier running back, I would say. And then really, I mean, it's just playing a game. Like, how can it's playing the game of like, what can I get away with? You need the thing that's a little different with auctions than snake drafts, and it kind of appears in snake drafts too, but you really have to kind of like concede a weakness, in your team, no matter what, whether it's a $1 quarterback and a 1 QB or $1 tight end or whatever it ends up being, or, no running backs to speak of whatsoever. And you're just paying down at the position. You have to concede somewhere. But the thing is that every running back, especially when they have a committee, which is what most running back rooms are now in the league. There are going to be playable weeks for both of those running backs, and you're not going to be able to predict it, but there's going to be plenty of RB1 weeks from some of those guys. There's going to be and really the thing about running backs too is like matchup dependency kind of makes a huge difference, right? Like you can tell usually, okay, I know that this team is going to be playing for behind. The pass catcher probably might get a few more looks this week. I know they're going to be playing from ahead. That means a lot more goal line opportunities. Those kind of things are, we can kind of try and predict the future to help give us a good outcome. And that, when you do that, you can, with a running back, it's a little easier to kind of figure that out, even with those platoon guys. Whereas with a wide receiver, like every week there's 3 of them on the field, right? For the most part. So the touchdown could just go to somebody else, on the plays that you're looking for. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's really just understanding that they have standalone value, whether it's upside from touchdowns, whether it's upside from pass catching, and the fact that they're just so cheap. That's the
Like some of these running backs I went super cheap, like real quick, that were under $10. Devin Singletary for $3. Jonathan Brooks for surprisingly $5. I think that's just because the news of him coming out about his ACL, that he actually might not be ready for OTAs, but we'll see how that goes. Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford are both going at the same price, also at $3. Marshawn Lloyd, the rumors are that the Packers are looking to go platoon, so the Josh Jacobs take could start. Marshawn Lloyd jumping on up. That's another player I like. And then I don't know how you guys feel, but Zamir White, I like him, but I don't know if he can actually handle up to it the whole entire workload, like what we saw from Josh Jacobs. But at that kind of price, those kind of prices are like price I'm willing to take chances on.
He doesn't need to. He doesn't need to play up to that. He doesn't need to at that price.
Even Tony Pollard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, my 2 most expensive were Mostert at 7 and Zach Moss at 11. And Zach Moss is at 11. The only reason, or is it 12? 12. Zach Moss at 12. And the only reason that existed is because Adam bid me all the way up all the way he could, because we were all fighting for the same running backs. And I wish that I kind of got, Tajay Spears maybe instead of this guy or that guy. But Zach Moss and Raheem Mostert both scored double-digit touchdowns last year, I'm pretty sure. Mostert had 18, and when you're getting an 18 touchdown guy in Mostert, you can't expect that to repeat. But for $7, do you think that maybe he could catch 10 get 10 touchdowns? I'm willing to at least bet that he might, right? Like that's the thing.
the what if scenario with all the running backs from R1 all the way to RB 100 is what ifs. What if Christian McCaffrey does it again? What if Christian McCaffrey gets hurt? Everyone's keeps saying nothing's gonna happen to Christian McCaffrey. He's good to go. We have nothing to worry about. It's I don't know, guys. Just because he did it last season doesn't mean he can do it again this season. I mean, we've seen him be injured before. We know how it goes with these running backs. Running backs are always one injury away. You always got to look at the depth charts. See who the RB2 is. See who these RB3s are. Try to attack those players if you actually really think they have the genuine opportunity to be the RB1 in your or RB2 even in your lineup if you really need them.
Yeah,
all right, guys.
And kind of just really quickly what you said, Ryan. I think sometimes with the hesitation of going zero RB is just that it's hard because you end up seeing all these great players and all these great names just flying off the board, and you're just sitting there and you're sitting there and you're sitting there and you're like, oh man, I really wish I had that guy on my team. I really wanted Jahmyr Gibbs. I really wanted McCaffrey, whomever. But you're able to build other facets of your team so much more that I think it really just it makes your team just that much stronger.
Absolutely.
It's just hard to see those names go by and you're just kind of sitting there, but you have to remember you're getting great players at great value, and you're able to allocate your budget to make your wide receivers super strong, to make your tight end strong, to go heavy quarterback. There's trade-offs you can make, and I think running back is the position. If you're going to make a trade-off, that's the one to do it at.
Sounds good. All right, guys, we're going to move on to the Q&A part of ours. We actually have 2 questions this week compared to the last couple of weeks where we had nothing. All right, Adam, the first one comes from Jason. You can find him at Be More Like Moses on X. Jason's question is, when going hero RB, how much are you willing to spend on your RB1?
Yeah,
Adam, what are you willing to spend on your RB1?
Yeah, going back to what I said about hero RB strategy, it's you have to identify the running backs you expect to score at least 17 fantasy points a game. And again, you can assume there's probably only going to be 5, 6, 7 players to do that again in 2024. So based on current AAV, you're probably going to need to budget at least $40 in both single QB and superflex formats, and probably closer to $50 or more, potentially a lot higher in if you want that potential top scoring running back. And his second part of the question, when are you doing zero RB and how much you're willing to spend? Regarding zero RB, again, I was super satisfied with the running backs I was able to draft for $18 in our Superflex mock draft last night. So I'd recommend setting aside probably somewhere around $25 to give you a little bit more wiggle room and just a little bit more flexibility.
Let's see, that'd be 25 divided by 200. So about 12% of your budget, kind of set it aside for your RBs in general. 12, 13% in that range.
Yep.
Yeah, and just going back to what you spend on your top hero RB, for me, 75% of my nucleus in a 3 wide receiver. That's the highest I'm really looking to go. 75% of my budget on my nucleus for 5 players. Those top 2 prices I'm looking at are $46 and $38. So basically, what I'm doing is I'm looking at guys like McCaffrey, Hall, Gibbs, Bijan. I'm looking to push them up to 43, 44. See if somebody goes over 46. Once they hit that 46 threshold, I'm out. And honestly, if I feel like they're going to go for, everyone's going to go higher, I'll just wait it out and make sure, right? Just wait, see what that last dollar amount ends up being, and bid one more if you feel like you can get it closer to 46, right, for me. Then we're looking at that 38 tier. That's where all my gold guys are going to go. Or even tier down to $30 if I can get one of my gold tier guys in the $30 range. That's kind of where I'm looking at for hero RB. But it's player dependent. You still, again, McCaffrey, even though I'm only willing to spend necessarily par sheet wise, I'm only willing to spend $46 on my first player off the board. Christian McCaffrey is worth more than $46. He just is. There are players that are worth more than that. And if you feel like you want to do that, and you feel like you really want Christian McCaffrey, sure, go, bid $50, $54, whatever it ends up being. But once they get into the $30 range, you have to be out. Or else you're really messing up the rest of your balance.
Yeah, you're definitely for sure killing it there if you do something like that, go too high. Then you're just sitting back and watching for way too long, being like, man, I could have had this guy for that price. Like you started
Yeah.
playing that what if scenario game. Like, what if I would have just done this? This wouldn't have happened. That guy would have been out, and now he's getting all the better players. All right, and then our one last question came from Ped Fitty. I'm starting an auction league this year, and I'm wondering what general strategy do you use?
What's his name? Pen. Hi, Pen. Welcome to Absolute Auction. I would encourage you to go back to episode 1 and look over our auction mindsets and start there. We also have a really good second episode where we talk about building a par sheet. So that would be where I start. My two mindsets, without getting into them, is knowing your values. I talked about that a little bit just in this episode, and on pretty much every episode we've had. And then the other, which I also talk about just about every episode, and Adam touched on it tonight, so I didn't have to, is knowing your league, knowing your settings, knowing the players in the league, knowing your preferences, knowing their preferences, knowing all that extra stuff. But we don't have the time to really go through that. You really should just go back and watch those first.
Yeah,
Watch all the episodes. There's only 4 of them.
absolutely. Yeah, Mark, you nailed that one on the head, man. Go back in the episodes. You can understand our strategies, our ideas, our mindsets of how we go into these auction drafts. Because what it really boils down to is strategy is going to be your scoring and how many starters you have. That's what it really boils down to figure out how you want to build it. All right, guys. You guys got anything else for this week? It's kind of a short week, Got 4th of July on Thursday.
I'm just gonna be sitting at home for 4th of July this year. I'll be barbecuing out back probably, but we'll just be hanging at home, I think.
All right, my daughter turns lucky number 13, so we'll be celebrating her birthday on the 4th of July as she is a 4th of July baby. All right, guys.
Happy
Thanks.
birthday, that's right.
I'll let her know. All right, guys. For Mark, for Adam, I'm Ryan. This is Absolute Auction Podcast. We'll see you guys next week.